The last thing and the key to all of this is I tell her the truth. As of today, despite the terrible automotive purchases I've made over the years, my wife is still married to me, and that may come as a surprise to many people, especially given some of my comments. But I'm practicing to be an old man most of my life, in that my humor is incredibly dry. I always joke about how I look at a car, I find a car like my Kingpin Suburban or Seascape or whatever. My wife is always says, "No, can't buy it." And I say, "Shut up, woman, and buy it anyway." But there's a number of layers behind that jesting, and and my wife actually brought up a lot of these points because, I go to her sometimes and say, "Hey, does it bother you that I just buy this stuff?" And she said no, because there's a number of reasons that it doesn't bother her. Number one, I have obviously a track record of not losing a ton of money on cars. I mean, yes, I'm in the car business, so I'm a professional at it, but even the cars I procure personally are ones that have a decent payoff. I think the car that cost us the most money to own since she's known me is the M3 that I bought for her that ended up just being terrible. We had to spend like half of the car's value in maintenance and then couldn't sell it and whatever. But all the other toys that I've bought somewhat on a whim that she thought were ridiculous, she stopped complaining about, because when I sold them for a 10 or 40% profit after enjoying them for a year or so, then okay, well, not a big deal. So number one, I have a good track record of not making stupid decisions, even though they may seem ridiculous on the surface. Number two, I don't spend a large percentage of our net worth or our income on these cars. I'm buying $10,000 or $20,000 usually, toys like the Suburban, and Seascape was $3,500. So in the grand scheme of things, on a relative scale, it's a small amount of money to play with if something does go wrong. I'm not out there buying $500,000 cars. And to that effect, I'm paying cash. So I'm not leveraging our future. I'm not putting us in potential financial straits as a result of these purchases. And women typically are more inclined to have a need for security than men are. And so I do not threaten our personal financial security as a result of my ridiculous procurements. And the last thing and the key to all of this is I tell her the truth. I don't hide these purchases from her. I may inform her after I've made the decision, or I may ask her opinion and then do the opposite of what she opines. But I say, "Hey, I bought this car." And over the years, being in the car business and the storage business, I've noticed some trends with people that make interesting automotive decisions and do not keep their wife in the loop. And it tends to lead to marital strife. So I've kind of come up with a little bit of a guidebook on how to enjoy the car hobby without putting your marriage in danger. And some of it I've learned from myself and my own experience of what to do, and some of it I've observed from other people in their ridiculous behaviors and decisions when it comes to cars. The first one is obviously tell your wife the truth. Let her know what's going on. And I've had a number of customers who will buy cars, and I had one guy actually for quite a while who would buy a car for the purpose of flipping it, and he had a leasing license and all of that. His wife didn't have to know that it was titled to them, and I think he had a business bank account and all that, so that sheltered the financial transactions from her. But he would send the car to me and have me keep the car at my shop, and sometimes for 6 months, sometimes for a year or so, and then have me sell it. And half the time he never even got the car. And I'm like, well, what's the point of this? Are you buying it to flip, or are you buying it for yourself? And a lot of times it was just an impulse decision, but he didn't want to tell his wife because he already had 3 or 4 cars. So he'd send it to me and then realize that he had to sell it because he couldn't tell her about it. So he'd end up consigning it with me, and so she'd never even find out about it. that's not a great start. I think maybe she had found out about a couple and given him a lot of grief. I never really got into it. They seem to have a good thing going and have been married for a long time, but maybe part of that is because he kept hiding cars from her. But I think the better recipe would just be to not buy those cars. I think his decisions protected their marriage, and they had a wonderful marriage, but the outcome from a car perspective didn't really work because, he wasn't telling his wife about them, therefore he couldn't enjoy them, and he was being forced to sell them because he hadn't told his wife about them. So after paying me for storage and consignment fees and things like that, he wasn't making out financially. So it was costing him a bunch of money to own these cars that he never really owned other than technically. So, what's the point if you can't enjoy the car or even share it with your wife? Then, that's not a great outcome. You may protect the marriage, but then you diminish the enjoyment of the car. And the point of all this is to be able to do both. I actually had a customer one time that I sold an R8 to, and he's not a crazy spender. He usually only has one or two cars at a time, but he has a serious case of ADD, so he's always kind of switching out. And he has plenty of money, but for whatever reason, this purchase he didn't clear with his wife, and so it upset her big time when he brought it home. So he called me like 2 days later. He's like, I gotta bring it back. I was like, that's fine. It's no big deal. I want to keep you guys happy, so bring it back. Not a big deal. And like a week went by and he hadn't brought it back yet. I was like, Mark, what's the deal? You got everything sorted out? He's like, I don't know. I think she's kind of warming up to it or whatever. It's like, well, don't let my car sale be the cause of your marital strife. Like, if you need to bring it back, just bring it back. And it took him a while, but I guess he finally softened her to the idea of it. But again, a lot of it is just, make sure your wife is on the same page with you before you just bring home a new car. Unless you're like me, where we just have an understanding that that's my thing, and my wife knows that I won't make any decision that puts us in, financial jeopardy. I've earned her level of trust over the years by being honest and by making good decisions and by establishing that track record. So that leads me to another thing is I see a lot of guys try to sell it to their wives on false premise. And they essentially have either bought into the lie, or they're trying to get their wives to buy into the lie that a car is an investment. A car is not an investment. It might be for a dealer because we're buying it wholesale and selling it retail. But the average consumer does not have the opportunity to buy it wholesale and sell it retail. I was talking with Rabbit about this whole phenomenon, and he was making fun of a lot of customers who would come to him with this deal that they had found at a dealer, saying like, oh man, it's only 40 grand. This is totally a 60K car all day long. I'm going to buy it. I'm going to make money. And Rabbit's response is like, yeah, that's what a dealer is in business to do. A dealer that spends their entire livelihood and time researching the market, figuring out what cars are worth, they're in business to leave a 20% profit on the table for whoever comes along and wants to make it. Like, if you are a consumer and you have that mentality or have that assumption, you're an idiot. Car dealers are in it to make money off you, not to help you make money. And I think a lot of car salesmen perpetuate that lie too, because they say, oh, this car is guaranteed to go up in value. It's going to go up in value. And I'm like, if it's going to go up in value, then why are you selling it? Keep it and realize the gains yourself. So I've seen a lot of customers who buy these cars and justify it to their spouses or themselves because, wow, this thing is going to go up in value. And that's a terrible way to go, because as soon as it doesn't, you've lost that level of trust with your spouse. And the next time you try to use that line or buy a car or whatever, then she might not be so inclined to let you do it. So bottom line is, cars cost money. Be honest about that with yourself and your spouse, and things will go a lot better. One crazy example of that was with a non-customer of mine who was a total pain in the rear. It's fine. I was happy to not ever sell him a car. He bought a 575 Super America from a local competitor. And I think this was when they were $500,000. And that dealer had been buying up Super Americas, as a lot of times dealers will do, myself included, to kind of, control the market, maybe help the market out a little bit, drive it up. And so they were commanding the pricing on Super Americas at the time. I think this was around 2013, 14. And so he bought it and put it on a lift in his garage under a cover up above his other cars, and told his wife that it was their retirement. And he financed it out the butt. Listen, I don't want anyone to lose their retirement or lose their shirts. But when you go into it with that kind of attitude, I don't feel badly at all that that car is now worth about half of what he paid for it. When people talk about cars as their retirement, I laugh, because I think it was Jeff Foxworthy that had the line, you're a redneck if you think that your retirement is in, commemorative NASCAR plates. And, we all make fun of the guy who has the 4-mile Monte Carlo SS Dale Earnhardt edition, thinking that that's his retirement. But then as exotic car guys, we do the same thing, just on a more grandiose scale. So we're making the same asinine decisions, thinking about these cars as retirement plans. The problem is not that some cars won't go up in value, because there are some Ferrari 250 GTOs and California Spiders and extremely limited blue chip cars that do vastly outperform the stock market. But those are a very small category of cars. Most cars do not do that. Most cars cost money to own. And the problem really is the philosophy of it. If you're buying a car as an investment, you're not buying it because it's fun or because you want it. And we shouldn't be buying Ferraris for their investment potential, because they weren't made for that. They were made to, as Enzo Ferrari says, I don't care if the door gaps are straight or anything like that. I just want the driver to essentially pants when he steps on the gas. And that's what car ownership is about. And we should, I think Ed said this about getting his wife into enjoying cars, is you want them to share that enjoyment. That type of passion is infectious. But when it all becomes about the dollars and cents, you better make sure you're darn right, because if you're wrong, you're going to ruin your ability to enjoy the car hobby, because your wife and yourself is going to be burned by not realizing an investment potential that you thought was a sure thing. And now you look at cars as a bad taste in your mouth because of the unrealized investment, instead of saying, man, that's an awesome car. I had so much fun with it. Have the right reason for buying a car. Don't think of it as an investment. Don't tell your wife that it's an investment. Tell your wife that you're buying the car. Be passionate about cars, not for their investment potential, but their fun potential, and share that passion with your wife, with your family. And that's usually the best recipe to continuing to enjoy the car hobby and having spousal support. And if you are of the mindset that you love flipping cars all the time, but you want to do it in a way that keeps your wife happy because you love your wife as much as your car collection, you can go buy this t-shirt from my website.